Hi, in this session we are going to talk about the path from manual to automated testing. I am Denis, Principal Software Developer at Inflectra. If during or after the session you will have any questions, please use the chat window for this workshop. Let's get started. When I say from manual to automated testing, I do not mean stop doing manual testing and completely switch to automated testing. This is wrong and unlikely feasible. What I mean is automate regression checks and free more time for doing manual exploratory testing. There is no goal to reach 100% automation, and actually there is no goal to reach any percentage of automation. We need to automate those scenarios that will show clear benefit over manual approach. Gains should overweight losses. What automation can give us? With automation, we can execute tests more frequently and thus find errors earlier. Also, with automation, we can execute more tests and thus find more errors. Also, automation is not prone to human error during routine checks. So, first thing in automation is to choose a scenario. We should see clear benefit, and then implementation and execution. And now it is a demo time. As usual, I will take a real-life example and will use it to show basic principles and important features. My application under test today is OpenMRS Medical Record System, and for us it is important that this application has user roles, and depending on the role, a user may see or not see specific modules in the system. I am going to log into the system as administrator first, and you can see that administrator has access to about 9 modules in the system. So let's now log into the system as a nurse, and the nurse can see just 4 modules. And here is my scenario. I am going to check that a user with a specific role can see specific modules and cannot see others. And this scenario is pretty easy to implement, and the checks are very similar to each other. And the scenario itself is so boring that manual testers will definitely say me, "Thank you." The manual test would look like this, and execution of it would take about a minute. You may check yourself. Here I will skip this very boring part. Now I will automate this scenario, and I will show you how the result looks like depending on the skill level of an automation engineer. There will be 5 levels in total, and what's important, the test will work at all levels. Let's go. Level 1. At this level, automation engineer has no programming and no XPATH knowledge, almost non-technical person. If you do not know what XPATH means, don't worry, I will show it later. So let's record our test. Here is Rapise with an empty test, and I start recording. And first I'm going to log into the system as administrator. Admin 123. Login, and here we see the modules that we want to check. And to add such checks in my test, I need to learn these objects and add them to object repository. So I am placing my mouse over each tile and pressing Ctrl 2 on the keyboard. And this adds them to the object repository. So 4 more to go. And the last action is to log out from the system. And I'm also going to log into the system as a nurse, since we want to check our roles with different users. Here we are, and clicking logout and finishing. Let's take a look at the recorded steps. Here we are logging in as administrator and logging out and doing the same as a nurse, and this is what we've got after the recording. We see intercepted steps. But this test is now missing steps that check in the presence or absence of specific tiles in the system. But we learned those tiles and added them to object repository. So if we will expand the home window in our object repository, we can see all of them. Active vitals, capture vitals, register a patient, all of them are here. And let's add check for the first one, find patient record. So it should be somewhere here after we are logged in into the system. And this is a check, and I am going to add an assertion into Rapise. And this assertion, we will be checking the presence of a specific element in the application. So our condition should be output is true. And our condition, our assertion message that will go to the report should be find patient record is visible. Here it is. And we just need to add a check that finds this element and returns true if it is visible. To do that, I will use navigator global object, and it has check object exists action. I just need to specify what object I need to check for existence. And it is in my object repository. Here it is. Now I'm going to add checks for all other tiles in my system. Let's see what we've got after editing the test. For each tile, we have a check that verifies that a tile with a specific name is visible. Let's scroll down to the part of the test that checks tiles for nurse. And here you may see that for some of them, the check wants to verify that the tile is not visible. So here in the condition we have output is false. And in the message cell here we have the name of the tile is not visible. Let's execute our test to see how it works. So I'm hitting play. The report is all green. It means that our tiles for specific roles visible or not visible in a way like we want them to be. Our level 1 test is complete. We recorded it, then we did some modifications, added steps to the test, and then executed successfully. Level 2. If you noticed, all our steps are on a single sheet in RVL. So it is very long and it is very hard to understand what it is doing. So on level 2, we will apply some decomposition skills. So to do that, I will create 3 new RVL sheets. So one of them will have the name main, and the second one will have the name admin, and the third one will be nurse. And I am going to simply put the steps that are related to administrator role check-in to their admin sheet here. So I will copy the steps from RVL sheet, copy, and we'll paste them here. So pasting, and I will do the same for the steps that I check in tiles for nurse. So copying the steps, copy, and paste them to nurse sheet. So paste. And now on the main sheet we can simply run the steps that are now on the admin and nurse sheets. So to do that, as an object, I am selecting RVL and the action is do play sheet. And in the sheet name I have a combo box and I can select the sheet that I want to run. And let's do the same for nurse sheet. So do play sheet. And here is the combo box. Here we go. I will quickly execute this sheet so you will see that it does exactly the same as we have on the main RVL sheet. So play this sheet. Execution is successful. Level 2 test is complete. We use decomposition to split the long sequence of steps into several sheets. Level 3. On this level I am going to use basic JavaScript knowledge. Let's switch to our RVL and take a look at the assertion statement. It has 3 lines and we had to enter some string here manually for every tile. So adding one assertion took a lot of time from a tester. So I want to speed up this process and I'm going to create a very simple function. To do that, I go to user.js file and we'll create a function. The name of the function will be check tile visible and it will have 2 parameters. So the first one will receive ID of an object from object repository and I will name it tile. It will be ID of a tile that we learned during our recording. And the second parameter will be Boolean value that will indicate if this tile should be visible or not. So to implement this function, I will return back to RVL and will copy assertion. I will copy it as JavaScript and will paste it here. Paste. This is how the assertion looks like in JavaScript mode. And I want now to parameterize this assertion. It now using find patient record and I will use the parameters of my function. Here we are using tile and where we are checking object for existence, we also need to use ID of our object, tile, and visibility is inside the visible parameter. So here we go, the function is ready, it is very simple, it contains declaration and just one line of logic, and I am returning to RVL and I will simply replace this assertion with my new function. So choosing functions as an object, and in the drop down I now have name of my function. Here we go, parameters generated automatically. So let's check that find patient record is visible. So let's change it here to true. Now our check occupies just 2 lines and it is very fast and easy to add. So we just selecting the tile from the object repository. And now I will do the same for the rest of assertions on this sheet. Modification is complete. Let's run the test to see if it works with the new function. So the same scenario works first. It's all green, so the function works perfectly. So I added the function in JavaScript and now the test looks cleaner and easier to understand. If I would have this function available before we started creating the test, modification and adding the steps for checking the tiles would take less time. Level 4. Here I will use XPATH knowledge. If you remember, during recording of the test we had to learn every tile one by one. But it is not necessary. We could do a very small change to our function and we could skip learning every tile. So I will show you how to do that. For this we will use XPATH. So first I am going to reach the state of the application where all the tiles are visible. So I am logging into the application as an admin and my tiles are visible, and now I will run WebSpy. It should connect to the page and show me the DOM tree. So I want to track one of the tiles to see how it looks like in the DOM tree. So every tile, I see that every tile is a link, and inside this link we have an icon and we have a text. So let's build the XPATH that can find the tile using the text that is displayed on this tile. So to do that, I will write this XPATH expression. So it should be an A tag. And here you can see that inside A there is a text node and there is also an icon node. So to match the text I will use normalize space function that will remove all their carriage return symbols or excess spaces in the beginning and ending of the string, and it should equal, let's test it if we can find patient record. So I am testing my XPATH and the test is successful. The tile has been highlighted. So this is the XPATH that I will use in my function. So I am canceling the WebSpy and go into user.js file. Here I will assign my XPATH to a variable. Here we go. And if you will take a look in Rapise documentation for check object exists action, it also may receive instead of object ID, it may receive XPATH of an object. So here I may use XPATH. So I will use XPATH, and this XPATH should be parameterized. So I don't want to use object ID here anymore. So let it be just string, and I will parameterize my XPATH here. I will use the tile that is passed here as a parameter. So let's see how we can use this function now in our test. So instead of passing the object ID here, we may simply type the text that should be displayed on the tile. So find patient record. And I also want to change the parameter type from object ID to string to match our new function. So here we will use text that is displayed on a tile and not the ID of an object that we have in the object repository. So let's now test these two lines. So place selection, and it should find patient record and print that it is visible. So it works very well, and we now need to update the rest of our test. And now I am going to show you a very interesting feature in Rapise. So imagine that someone created a list, and this list contains names of all titles in OpenMRS system. So I will copy this list to the clipboard, And in Rapise, I will add a very interesting spreadsheet. So the name of this spreadsheet should be drop downs. This is a special name. So I'm creating the spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet may contain the lists that may be used by RVL here in the drop downs. And to instruct Rapise what list to show for a specific function and specific parameter, we need to add columns to the drop downs. So, and here to show the list of tile names for every function that has tile parameter, I will define a column here with the name tile, and will paste the list of tile names here. So now if I will return to RVL and will expand this drop down, it will show me the tile names, and it will help me to very easily update all the calls to this function in my test. Level 4 test is complete. With such a function that we have now and the drop-downs Excel file, it is much easier and faster to build such a test. So let's now run it to see that it works. Play in this sheet. Perfect. Knowledge of JavaScript and XPATH may save a lot of time, as you can see. And we are now moving to the last level, level 5. On this level, I am going to make the test data-driven. So let's create a new sheet here, and let's name it data-driven. And I will take everything from admin sheet and will copy to data-driven. So copy and paste it here. So I am going to create an Excel file first. So create spreadsheet, and let's leave the default name data. And here I will have a sheet that I will name admin. It will contain the information about what tiles should be visible and what tiles should not be visible for an admin. So let's have two columns here. One column will be tile and the second will be visible. So we now have a drop-down Excel file, and I'm going to grab the names of my tiles from this spreadsheet. So pasting this list here, and in the visible column I will define what tiles should be visible and what tiles should not. So everything should be visible for the admin, so I will use true for every cell in this column. So now we have our data inside the spreadsheet. Let's now create another sheet for nurse user. Okay, so we have our data ready, and actually it can be prepared not by an automation engineer but by someone else in the team. So let's return to our RVL. And here I will delete all the function calls except one, and will bind to my spreadsheet. So I will add a map, and the type of this map should be range. And let's give it the name data, it's fine. And we are getting data from data Excel file, and we will read the data from admin sheet. Okay, so, and in the function call that is still here, I will use data from my spreadsheet. So I will change the param type of tile name to data, and here I will use the name of the first column. It is tile, and the boolean is data now as well. and the column name is visible. So what we need to do here is just select this call and wrap it into loop. And this loop will use map, and the map is data. So what we have here on the data-driven sheet now is we have a binding to a data spreadsheet to admin sheet, and we have a loop that will iterate through all the lines in the data file and will check every tile with the name that we have here on admin sheet in the tile column. So let's run this sheet and see how it works. So we are now not in locked in state, and I can simply play it. Now our test is data driven, and let's see the report. So here we can see the names of all titles, and all checks were successfully passed. The next step is to run all these checks for all the user roles that we want to check. So we are now running it for admin, and I want to run it for nurse as well. So I want to parameterize this part as well. I'm adding a few lines in the beginning, and I will add the table with logins here. So I am adding a map. Let's give it a name logins. I just need first two columns. The first one will be username, and the second one will be password. And we now have two users. And now I'm going to select all the steps in my test and wrap them into another loop. So wrap selection into loop. And this loop will also use map, and it will use logins. So I will simply delete some lines that we don't need. And now I need to parameterize my steps here. So for parameter type, I will be using logins, and here username. And I need to do the same for the password. And I will also do the same for the sheet name, from which we should get the visibility of tiles. So here I will use logins and username. So the whole test now occupies less than 30 lines. Let's now run it to see if it works. So I will now play just data-driven part. Perfect. Let's look at the report. So here we can see that for the nurse, Rapise really used data from the spreadsheet and check that, for example, data management is not visible, system administration is not visible. So it means that the test really works. Let's summarize. The more skills an automation engineer has, the more possibilities for automation. The skills that I mentioned today are choosing the right scenario, doing decomposition, knowledge of JavaScript and XPATH, and of course, knowledge of a testing tool, Rapise. Thanks for watching. I am Denis from Team Rapise at Inflectra. Thank you for joining me today.